Aaron Miles didn't know that he was going to die today. He did know, however, that the information he'd stolen was the most volatile he'd ever delivered. Snatching it from under the noses of Cuban intelligence might be praiseworthy, but Aaron could only care about not getting caught. The first 24 hours of espionage operations were the most crucial and the most vulnerable time for spies. He checked his watch. "This is it?" his compatriot asked, looking at the sheet of information he'd been given. Aaron didn't know his name. He didn't know Aaron's. It was best that way. "It's enough," said Aaron in a low tone, repressing the urge to look over his shoulder. He'd been doing this job long enough to know the best way to get caught was acting suspicious. "It's a single page. Where's the rest?" Aaron hunkered down in his booth and gestured for the man to keep quiet. They had elected to meet at the Nostrovia. It was the only retro-Soviet restaurant in Havana and the designated share point for Russians in his spy network. A server walked by. Neither of the agents spoke until she passed. "That's all I could get." The other agent didn't reply. "I've been here too long already," Aaron said quietly. I have to go." The other agent nodded reluctantly, but there was nothing more to say. Aaron looked out the window to admire Cuba's pastel buildings, but found his eyes lingering onto others crumbling with their scaffolding exposed to the street. The slums sat next to such beautiful buildings, most split in two, so families could live one atop the other. Poverty was no secret here. Aaron downed his drink in one go, left American dollar bills for payment, and got up to leave. He watched the other man tuck the delicate paper into a pocket before being satisfied enough to walk out the door. The afternoon was hot, but Aaron felt a chill. He tucked his hands in his suit jacket pockets and decided on a brisk pace, one not so quick as to bring attention, but not so slow to make him linger. He had to get to the American embassy. This last piece of intel had finally fallen into place. He had solved the puzzle. What lay before him was something so destructive he could hardly believe it existed. Once at the American embassy, he could count his mission as a success, and some of the burden would pass on. He would finally be able to rest easy. He fell into step along the Malecon, the famous and beautiful walkway and seawall that stretched along Havana, Cuba's coast. It passed through the three neighborhoods of Havana and was known as its living room. In the evening, the Cubanos would come out to watch the sunset or to drink and dance. Aaron had a feeling that he wouldn't be enjoying the sunset of the Malecon that evening. After a few minutes of wary walking, he stripped his jacket and turned to face the coast, allowing himself to do a discreet 180 to make sure he wasn't being followed. But Aaron's only company along the Malecon were the fishermen standing on the seawall and the seagulls screaming to one another. He threw his jacket over his shoulder and walked past two fishermen laughing and untangling themselves from seaweed that had blown over the wall with a crashing wave. He found himself staring at the fishermen. Had he ever been so carefree? He wondered if he'd ever have that luxury again. Another wave crashed over the seawall, and the spray of salt grazed him, breaking him from his reverie and urging him onward. Although he was in a hurry, he decided not to take a cab from the restaurant. If he were being watched or tailed, surely Cuban counterintelligence would send their own agent to pick him up in a car, and he would have no way of knowing and no way out.